morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone joining us from different corners of the world. Uh, I'm Siddharth Malwali Nagesh, a proud student at BITS Pilani Dubai campus, and I'm currently serving as a campus director for the Millennium Fellowship batch of 2024. So it's an absolute honor for me to welcome all of you to the very first Millennium Fellowship webinar. And I want everyone to know that this isn't just simply another webinar, but it's a gathering of passionate young leaders like yourself who are here to make a difference. So let's keep the energy high. And if you're comfortable, I'd love to see your faces. So you could just turn on your camera, give us a little wave, drop in some reactions, emojis, anything really, just to show that you're as excited as I are to be here. Hello, everyone. Awesome. So firstly, to get all of us started, I invite all of you to sort of introduce yourselves in the chat. Just share your name, the country you're joining from, your university, probably what you're working on, and don't forget to mention what it really means for you as a person to be part of the Millennium Fellowship. And if anyone really feels up for it, just simply feel free to raise your hand, and me and my team would be thrilled to sort of let you unmute yourself so you can introduce yourselves to us in person. Okay, I see Anuj. Anuj, yeah, you can introduce yourselves.
Audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, Anuj, you're audible.
Yeah, so my name is Anuj Kumar, a third-year student from Sai University, and we are working on a project called Project Convizhi, which is a student-led initiative where we are aspiring youths working on the issues of posh activities like sexual harassment, domestic violence, even sexual rights. Because as a child, as someone who has been victim of sexual assault when I was in hostel, I knew what it happens, especially in a country like India, where we are born and brought up in a society where we are taught to be silent, and we can connect this by the ongoing things going in and around the country, like rape cases, because we keep silent even something happens back to us and we don't give much attention to it. That's why it becomes a major problem in the coming days or coming years. So that's how we are working on, and we are hopeful that we'll try to visit a lot of government schools where we can set up posh centers, so that the children from young age be acquainted with or be introduced with like what's bad touch, what's good touch, and they can be aware like how these things matters in as you enter your teen life, as you enter your adulthood life. So that's how the Project Convizhi is all about, and we are very excited to be a part of MCN, and I'm looking forward to work on this campus as a campus director. And thank you very much for this golden opportunity. I'm looking ahead.
Awesome. Okay, that was really great and sort of really inspiring what you are really trying to contribute. So it's really awesome, to be honest. But we'll be heading on to Ivan. Ivan Lugulva, is it?
Yes, thank you.
Hey, Ivan. Hi.
Yeah. Yes, hello, everyone. How are you doing? My name is Ivan Joseph Debura from Uganda. I studied from Uganda Christian University, and I am doing a degree in civil and environmental engineering. So for me particularly, I am working on a project that aligns with my course. I would like to reduce the carbon footprint that is like recently it is increasing in the country. So currently, we are trying to come up with a solar water heating system that is going to preheat water so that it can reduce the dependence of firewood, the dependence that people use on firewood. So that is our project. It is mainly aimed at reducing the carbon footprint. It is in line with climate change and green energy. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ivan. So there are more than 700 Millennium Fellows who have joined us today. And if it were up to me, I would sort of want to hear from each and every one of you and get to know you better. But we will have to squeeze in and due to time constraints, and we'll just go ahead with one more introduction, if that's fine. Shall we go ahead with Shazia? Shazia Batul?
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Shazia.
Assalamualaikum. I'm Shazia Batul, a graduate of IT from Quetta, Pakistan, and a campus director of the UDUMS. Well, I'm really excited that I have been selected as a campus director from Millennium Fellowship. I was not aware of that, but when I became aware, it was like I want to be included because I'm an entrepreneur. Am I audible? And I want to be included globally, and it's really a great meeting with my young leader as well from all around the world. I'm so happy to meet them.
Constraints, we will be moving on to the next session of our webinar, and we've got a really exciting segment ahead. So let's dive right in, and really, guys, please keep the energy and enthusiasm up and going. This is really nice to see all of you so excited for the event. So to the highlight of our session, I'm thrilled to introduce our distinguished speaker today, Mr. Ramu Damodaran. Just a brief intro of his. Mr. Ramu Damodaran has worked at the United Nations for more than 30 years, most recently as Chief of Partnership and Public Engagement in the United Nations, Department of Global Communications until May 2021. His responsibilities included relationships with civil society, the creative community, and celebrity advocates, publications as the chief editor of the UN Chronicle, the Dag Hammarskjöld Library, and the United Nations Academic Impact. He has also been the secretary of the United Nations General Assembly's Committee on Information from 2011 to 2021. And Ramu Damodaran is a member of the Leadership Council of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network and a senior advisor to the University for Peace. In addition to regular speaking engagements at universities and civil society organizations globally, he has taught and conducted courses on the United Nations at NYU, at Kyunghee University in the Republic of Korea, and at Macquarie University in Australia. So his earlier posts with the organizations have included departments of peacekeeping and special political questions, as well as the executive office of the Secretary General. He has also been a member of the Indian Foreign Service, where he was promoted to the rank of ambassador. He served as executive assistant to the Prime Minister of India, as well as in the diplomatic missions in Moscow and to the United Nations and in a range of national governmental ministries. Now, it's not every day that we get to hear from someone with such a wealth of experience and knowledge. So we are in for a real treat. Mr. Damodaran, the virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for that. And I was truly moved to hear Anuj, I think, and Ivan and Shazi explain what brought them to this tremendous effort, this movement, if you will, of minds and hearts. And my gratitude particularly to the Millennium Campus Network, its founder director and still energetic leader, Sam Vega, and to the United Nations Academic Impact, who have been collaborating on this project for several years now. I'm also very grateful to James, who all of you know, and as I've said, it's not everyone who gets to make 4,000 new friends every year, and James is in that fortunate capacity of having made friends with all of you, and for guiding as much as learning for you, just as I am. I'm not going to speak too long because I realize we just have about 60 minutes or an hour, and that passes very quickly. And I can see from your faces and from the hands raised that all of you have so much to say. So I really hope this will be a conversation. I really wanted to beg what you are doing and what the United Nations is doing in possibly an immediate historical context. And I'd like to do that by talking about the day that we are today, August 27th. And look at this date in history. Now, in 1859, on August 27th, in a small town called Titusville in Pennsylvania in the United States, a farmer working in his field was digging the soil and suddenly struck oil. And that became the start of what we today know as the global oil industry. That's in 1859. Fast forward to 1928, and you had two thinking minds very much like yourself. They did not necessarily hold any official position. They did not speak on behalf of governments, but they were committed, passionate individuals. Two individuals, Kellogg and Bryant. And they initiated the idea of a global no-war pact. This was 1928. The First World War was 10 years behind them, and no one had yet foreseen that in another 10 years, we would be in the midst of the Second World War. But both with hindsight and foresight, they created this no-war pact, which initially 15 countries joined in signing, and that number went up to 61. So what I was trying to suggest is, from these two examples, two things which I think really animate our world today. The first is how human ingenuity and passion can lead to a global change in resources and the economy, and oil and petroleum, and the story of that farmer in Titusville is an example. But it can equally lead to effects which are not as positive, as Ivan mentioned, in the context of climate change, in the context of fossil fuels, in the context of dangers to lives and livelihoods. So every example of human ingenuity, and each one of you, I say with all respect, is an instance of that human ingenuity. Each one of you is both a positive contributor and a potential negative force. Think of the 61 nations who joined the Kellogg-Briand Pact, or more particularly, think about the nations that did not join it. Now, a number of nations, like Anuj's and Shazi's, did not join it because they were not independent in 1928. Both Pakistan and India were ruled at that time by the British. So there was no way that the people of today's Pakistan and today's India could have wanted to join such a pact, even if they wanted to, because they were politically not empowered to do so. And the countries that did join it were soon to sacrifice the idealism of 1928 for the ambitions of 1939. So that is the second danger, which I would alert you to. The danger of not making your ideals proximate enough. Merely signing pieces of paper, merely issuing declarations is not the way to go. And I say this in all humility as someone who, as Siddharth was kind enough to share with you, who has worked in and with the United Nations for close to 40 years. And I realized that much of what I did, what my friends did, what my country did, what other countries did, was really getting together pieces of paper. But those pieces of paper always contained the two critical elements that created them: the mind and the heart. Possibly not in that order, maybe I should say the heart and the mind. But then it comes down traditionally to governments to give implementation to that. When I first came as a delegate to the United Nations in 1986, if any country had said in the halls of the United Nations, what is India doing about girls' education? What is India doing about poverty? I would have said, that is none of your business. That is an internal affair of India. As Anuj put it so beautifully, harassment of individuals, be they girls, be they boys, women or men, is something which has to be addressed at the local level, and it becomes an international responsibility to do so. That realization, which I did not have in 1986, you are privileged to have now, because governments have changed. And each of our governments now has made their global responsibility to work for their people, to help their people assume their rightful place in life and the world in which we are today. And so, in a few weeks from now, in less than a month from now, we will have the Global Summit for the Future. And that summit has an extraordinary number of documents coming from it, as all summits do. But I would like to close these opening remarks, if I may, with one thought from the document which will emerge at the end of September, which is that we are at a time of profound global transformation. Too many of our fellow human beings have and face avoidable suffering. We are confronted by a growing range of catastrophic and existential risks. If we do not change course, we risk tipping irreversibly into a future of permanent crises and breakdowns. You are at the tipping point. And some of you, and maybe even I will say, we have already tipped persistent crises and breakdowns. We began in 2020 with COVID. That was a crisis, and that could have led to a breakdown. Once we had put COVID behind us, we had the war in Ukraine. Even as we're coming to terms with the war in Ukraine, with the war in Gaza. So this seems to be exactly what this document says, a future of irreversibility. But friends, my work at the United Nations has also taught me that it pays to be an optimist. Things can change, event by event, person by person, heart by heart, and above all, can change through fellowship. The fellowship that all of you represent, the fact that you can reach out to all the other 3,999 of you by just picking up a tablet or your phone and sending a message. The fact that you can learn, you can communicate, you can share your frustrations, your angers, your joys, your happiness. All that was denied to my generation. But we did the best. You will do better. So, Siddharth, if I may, I'll now leave it open to you to guide the conversation.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Damodaran. Your insights are definitely very inspiring for all of us. And I'm sure that somewhere they've sparked a strong drive in all of us to pursue positive change. So before we open the floor for our fellows to ask their own questions, we have a few questions that we'd like to start with, which will just sort of help us dive deeper into some key concepts all of us are eager to explore. So firstly, sir, you know, the world is currently still very polarized, and we still face some of the largest humanitarian crises. And in such a climate, you know, we as young leaders, how do we break through this polarization and this divisiveness to create not only sustainable but also equitable impact to the society?
You know, Siddharth, please correct me if I misunderstood or I misread this, but just yesterday, I saw a fascinating entry on Quora in which someone wrote, we are looking for objects in other galaxies, faraway galaxies. But don't we realize that we have so many impediments in our own galaxy, and if we don't address them first, how will we be able to see something in a galaxy that is not our own? And if I'm not mistaken, you replied to that. And you made the point that the reason why we can see those faraway galaxies and objects within them is because the objects that are nearer to us are so small, so minute, that they can be overlooked and you can transcend them while you look into the greater future. I was haunted by that image. And I think it really represents the answer of what you were saying. The moment we think of factors like polarization, we think of the divisions that keep us apart, we think of the ideologies that our leaders profess. Those are the proximate, the near stars in our galaxy. But if we realize that compared to the greater prize that lies in that other galaxy, that prize of global human happiness and human freedom and of human right, not rights, but right, then we will realize that all these obstacles that we face every day are just shadows in the sun. So please don't be distracted. Yes, polarization is a fact of life today. Polarization was a fact of life in 1962. The two superpowers at that time nearly went to war, but they averted the war. The reason why that happened was because one of the superpowers was an autocracy. The people of that country had no right to determine the future of that country. That changed within 30 years in the early 90s. Why? Again, because of young Russians, young East Europeans, like each one of you. You can make it happen.
All right, sir. So moving on to the next question. So you've been working a long time. You've worked with the government of India, the United Nations. So how would you sort of describe the transformation through this phase, especially in the field of social impact? How would you describe things have changed? And what are the lessons that we as young leaders can take from these transformations to carry them out in the near future?
The one obvious lesson is that nothing is local anymore. Your successes, your failures, your rights, your wrongs are capable of reaching a global audience. That was very different in my time. In my time, if, let's say, an organization decided to dig wells in a village which had no drinking water, and the head of that organization were to siphon off part of the funds to put in his own pocket, people might not know about it for years because there was no communication, there was no accountability. Once you had a project in a particular locale, it remained there. That is not the world that you have created now. It's a world where whatever you do is going to be under scrutiny. It's a world where whatever you say or express will be challenged or will be applauded. So you are going to be in the public eye. We were not. And I would frankly ascribe a great amount of the infirmities or the failures of the world in which we lived, we grew up, and we worked precisely to that. We had a privacy which many people misused. You do not.
Yes, sir. So on to the third question. How do you think we as students can encourage more of the actions and discussions about the workings of the United Nations to create more effective solutions to the current existing humanitarian crisis?
I've been extraordinarily impressed by the greatest UN students movement of all, which is, I think, the model UN, the model United Nations, which certainly many universities and colleges have, and now increasingly a number of high schools have as well. There was a time when these were really little more than debating clubs because people had to act. They had to pretend to be a country, and they had to say what they felt that country would say. But it's moved far beyond that. And the model UNs that I've been privileged to attend and learn from have been very practical. And what is joyous about them, Siddharth, is that they go far beyond the normal UN in the terms of the subjects that they discuss. So let's go back to Ivan's point about climate change. It's okay if you have the UN discusses climate virtually all the time. We have at least 4 agencies dealing with climate. We have the annual conference of the parties on the environment. So it's an ongoing discussion, but it has never been very rooted or specific. I've been to a couple of model UNs where they say, what can we do about the problem of whales in the Pacific Ocean? Something like that. And that becomes so much more granular and localized that the ideas have also to be scientific, provable, workable, and ideas that require both research and imagination, which all of you possess in abundant measure. So I wouldn't say, to actually quote your own question, it's not so much the workings of the UN that we want people to understand. It's the possibilities in the UN which we ourselves have not realized, and you can help us to.
All right, so on to the final question from our end. What would be the one advice that you would want to leave us with through this fellowship? So I think most of the students over here, this is our first time with the Millennium Fellowship and the first time that we are sort of acquainted with community service and this sort of exposure to the community. So what is that one advice that you think we should move on with from here?
It'll be extraordinarily presumptuous of me to give advice. So I would really just want to share a thought with you, and it's not thought which maybe many people might approve of. I know that the one overarching impetus, if you will, to your fellowship and to the whole Millennium Fellowship Program is the Sustainable Development Goals. And all of you will be working through your project inevitably to further one or more of those goals in some way. I would only ask that you do not consider the Sustainable Development Goals to be a final goal, but a first goal, a beginning. Just as if you have a soccer match, someone has to score that first goal. By all means, let that be the first goal. We have to have a far more ambitious global and personal goal for this. I don't know if all of you can see the T-shirt I'm wearing. It's a self-portrait by Vincent van Gogh, the Dutch painter. And when you think of this essentially unhappy man, he famously cut off his left ear in a moment of remonstrance. He was not a particularly attractive man, either socially or, I dare say, physically, but it took time to paint himself and put his talents down. Why? Because he wanted to flourish in the best way he could. And he realized that his way of flourishing was through the canvas, the easel, and the paintbrush. He could do extraordinary things with those, and he did. So please, let your objective be not merely or only sustainable development, but true human flourishing. Because that is what animated this program that you're privileged to belong to when it was started by Sam and his friends, and the inspiration that has led it to be what it is today. And please realize that each one of us has something within us which we may not realize we have, but we can discover it. And in allowing that to flourish, it's not just a question of personal satisfaction, of personal recognition, or personal fulfillment. That flourishing will impact other people as well. And just as Van Gogh's paintings and art continue to bring pleasure and solace to millions of people around the world who either see it in museums or on the internet, so too will those acts of allowing the individual to flourish that you encourage gain that global currency.
Wow, thank you so much, sir, for those insightful remarks. Now we'll be moving on to the questions from our Millennium Fellows. So Millennium Fellows, this is a very great opportunity for you guys to sort of ask your questions, or whatever your questions you have, if you're sort of able to ask them. Feel free to raise your hands or put them in the chat box and I'll read it out for you. Nista, is it? Nista, you're on mute.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're
Yes, I can. Thank you. And I'm sure that can.
Yeah, hi, sir. Thanks for such a wonderful session. I would like to ask, like, as a students, for the first time, we are entering into this fellowship, right? So you would have come across many thousands of students who would be learning, who would be part of this community from years, right? So what transformation do you see from students to the end of 6 months that we become a community service provider? So how the journey goes on, how you have felt, like how we enter as students and how we come out, right? So I would like to know about your experience about regarding it.
My experience, or which I must confess is not been as fast as you've been kind enough to suggest, is that I've realized that this fellowship's greatest asset is its ability to be a trigger, because people are selected for it because of what they've done. I think you know quite clearly that there were, 50,000 applications, of which James and his team were able to choose 4,000, of which you are some. And that's an extraordinary privilege in itself. But the reason why you were chosen is because in your applications, you gave an indication of some particular project that you were involved with or initiated, which was relevant to the goals of the Millennium Fellowship. So my only hope, and this is what I've discovered, is that the year does not go by with your continuing to work only on what you've already begun, but through communication with other fellows, through reaching out, discover other opportunities. Why should a project that has not worked so well in Zambia or Ecuador not take off in India? So be able to do that. So I just hope it's going to be a fellowship of learning and listening as much as of consolidating and doing.
We'll go ahead with Vaishnavi.
Certainly, sir. Thank you so much. Am I clearly audible?
Yes.
Thank you so much for wonderful remarks, sir. I certainly had a question. Regarding my project, I founded an organization which is called Climate Cadets Collective, and I'm trying to involve the youth, basically the community engagement, and particularly going forward with the raising awareness and going forward with the intimidating, giving notices to the authorities and everyone regarding whatever wrong things are going up, and so that there's a community going on in the same regard. But I wonder, what kind of activities one can take up in such an initiative, where because there are so many other policy initiatives and think tanks already existing, but as a student like myself, I'm also studying environmental economics, and I'm not as an expert. So how do you suggest like we should move forward to bring a kind of a change that I want? But it's a very new that's under my project only. So I'm looking forward. How should I go beyond that particular policy framing and move towards this community engagement? Because everything is there on paper, but nothing goes on in real society, which is the major reason why I've formed this collective cadets who will be working on ground for the same. So would really wonder if you can just suggest me opportunities.
That's a question you have to answer. I mean, ask and answer. Why is it that everything looks good on paper, but you find that there's no place for it actually to realize itself on land, as it were? And very honestly, you have to make that connection. So if you find something that looks good on paper, and I'm very encouraged that you say that, because when I was a student, virtually nothing I studied looked good on paper. But if you do find something in environmental economics as a course that looks attractive, then think of it. It's entirely possible you may not find something in your immediate environment. Obviously, let's say if your environmental economics is about, say, working with glaciers in the Arctic to be able to save marine life, you're not going to be able to transplant that to South Asia. But there are things that might work within your own community. So please do think of that. And, I've always said what the United Nations needs to be today is not that old idea about think globally and act locally. That has become a little passé. What we now need to do is to think locally and act globally. And by that, I mean that think locally, put your environmental economics to work in the locality where you live and where you work. And through that, give a demonstrative success program that the United Nations can then adopt and act globally so that other communities who are in a similar situation can take it up as well. But ultimately, that realization of where the connection is and the making of that connection has to be yours.
Go ahead with Nadia. Nadia Kesa. Nadia, you're not audible. Not yet.
Hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I wanted to ask a question. I'm Nadia and I'm from Rwanda. I wanted to ask a question. When we were in the application and everything, there was a need of using social medias. Social medias for what? But do we need to show people that we are doing this thing? Do we need to show? Is it for voting? What is it for? Like social medias?
My understanding, of course, I would defer to James on this because this is really a question to the organization. But I find social media incredibly helpful, not just to give publicity to what you've done, but also to find other people who might be doing similar things to what you're doing and make connections with them. And those connections allow you to possibly improve what you're doing, to possibly start something new, and equally allow them to improve what they're doing or start something new. So I think social media today has replaced the much more tedious way that my generation grew up with, where you picked up a newspaper and you suddenly saw an item saying that, oh, there is this happening in Ghana. And then you said, why wouldn't that work in India? And then you could find the address of that NGO, send a letter by airmail, get a reply. You can imagine the amount of time and eventual loss of interest that led to. Social media allows you to do that within the space of 20 minutes.
Can we proceed with Andrew Sekide? And also just a kind request that all of you sort of introduce yourself so that this conversation is more engaging and we are able to connect with each other on the platform. Andrew, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. My question will resolve much. I'm doing
we can't hear you, Andrew.
Can you hear me? Am I audible enough?
Yes.
Yes, so my project is addressing SDG 3, and that's good health. It resolves on environmental health, given that I've been practicing it for the last 3 years. And this is more to do with solid waste management. From the understanding that solid waste management is a problem, not only in my country, but world over. So this project seeks to address the loopholes in this field of environmental health to address solid waste management. In that within my campus where I've built doing this and within my community, I hope to address that challenge. maybe I'm seeking for your guidance on how I can align with this with other objectives. Then, sir, my other question is, given that you have experience, you've worked with the United Nations and a good placement for anyone looking at diplomatic ties, why is it that we are having a derail in human life is becoming such a, I mean, why isn't the United Nations Security Council coming up to take its position in this tech with these all wars that are going around? Why is the United Nations Security Council coming up to ceasefire? Thank you so much.
The second is a very difficult question, but it's actually both a very difficult question and a question that has a very straightforward answer. And I think that involves a bit of history. Creating the United Nations was not easy. You can imagine when countries have been at war and they come together and have to create an organization to prevent another war, each one of those countries is in it for themselves. And the organization would not have come into being if the then 5 major powers in the world, the United States, the Soviet Union, China, Britain, and France, had not agreed that they would be party to such an organization. But they put one condition, that when it came to matters of peace and security, for which the Security Council had primary responsibility, they would have the right of the veto. And that is really what has happened in the cases of crises that you've mentioned. In both cases, a veto has been exercised, which has in effect limited what the United Nations and the Security Council can do. It's obviously subject to a far, far more detailed discussion. I'm putting it very simplistically. And I'm not suggesting necessarily that what could have been done or could have been attempted if the veto had not been there would have worked. But that very essentially is the answer to your question. But I would also like to say that for these 2 instances which have captured the headlines where the United Nations has not been as effective as one would want it to be, we've had many other instances in diverse parts of the world, ranging from Cambodia and East Timor in Asia to Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Western Sahara on the continent of Africa, to the former Yugoslavia in Europe, to Guatemala in Central and South America. All of these have succeeded with Security Council approval and authorization. To your first point, again, I think the key lies in communication. And I use communication in its broader sense of not only in talking and explaining, but also in listening. And I think you will find, to go back to the earlier point in social media, that you find a great deal in the activities environment around you, particularly among your other fellows, that will give you a chance to be inspired and will give them a chance to be inspired by you.
Can we proceed with Safiullah? Please do introduce yourself before you start. You're on mute. Safi, you're on mute.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, now you can, yeah.
It's Safiullah Khan Sudes here from the University of Peshawar, Pakistan. I would straight away go to my question so that I don't take a lot of time. Sir, I want to ask that how can we continue with our projects after this fellowship? Like, if I put it my project into your consideration, I'm working on quality education for those students who are from distant and remote areas in Pakistan. So, like, given the fact that we will be proceeding, we will be delving into our own professional lives and we will be working on our own careers. So how can we, like, for careers, I mean that we may have to move abroad, or we won't be having enough time, like as we are having now, and proceeding with our SDGs projects. And our, as you mentioned, that SDGs projects should not be your last goal, but it should be your first project. So how can we make such social positive social impacts and continuing it even after the fellowships? So I would love to hear your remarks on that.
All of us have this dilemma because we get extremely and rightly and passionately involved in projects when we have the time to be invested in them. And not all of us, frankly, can do it even when we are students. The fact that you, as a student, are investing some of the time that you would otherwise spend on purely recreation activities working for social change is a tribute to you, your imagination, and your conscience. I would only say 2 things. One is, do try and create what is sometimes referred to as a succession plan. Make your project so viable and interesting that other people who are like you are today, in 10 years, there might be another young Saifullah who decides that he would like to work on the very project that you are working on now and take the torch from you. Above all, and this is my personal advice, and I'm not really speaking on behalf of MCN or the UNAI on this, do not at any point sacrifice your personal, professional happiness and fulfillment to what you think is a duty you've started. If it's a duty you enjoy, and if it's a duty that can bring you sustenance and allow you to live in the way that you wish to live, by all means do it. But otherwise, do the best you can in your chosen career to make a social impact there, and leave the legacy of what you're doing now to others to take over from you.
So now we'll move on with Pankudi Kaur.
Sridhar, just repeat the name who we called upon.
Pankudi Kaur.
Yeah, I wasn't able to unmute my mic. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Pankudi and I'm studying at Symbiosis Bangalore right now. I'm thankful to United Nations and everybody around here for bringing me up here. Thank you, sir, for such grateful vision of your life, 40 years to United Nations. Being in India, you've been in India and you've worked around here. I have a special question to you. That can you comment upon one problem which has been persistent in India and which hasn't been addressed in a manner it should have been, and which you think is important to be addressed as soon as possible?
Oh, sorry, you want me to identify the problem? It's a fascinating question, because I think I'm always a bit daunted and discouraged by the word problem, because the way when you put it, but there's no denying the fact that these are also problems. But I think that we have to realize that it's a landscape that has as many problems as people who are determined to put them out of our way. If you were to ask me what the single largest problem we have, it's very bluntly put, it's your generation and what can be done for them and what you'll be able to do for yourself. The fact that getting into virtually any government job requires so much effort and so much competition, and the fact that so many people still want to go into those government jobs is itself a part of the problem. I'm not downsizing or diminishing the value of government jobs, but I do hope that people don't take those examinations purely because they feel that that's the easiest way to get a career. I, with all respect, look on individuals like you as people who have, above all, entrepreneurial capacity and capability. The fact that you will be able to create jobs where none exist, and so in creating those jobs, address this large problem of the youth dividend. Between the growing youth population in our country, the diminishing opportunities there are for work and for livelihood, more and more of the focus will have to come to be on creating jobs. And look at the transformation that what we now refer to as the IT sector has caused for the young generation in India, and I dare say across the world itself. When I was growing up, none of us would have even envisaged the possibility of a career in IT and all its assets. But why did IT happen? Because of a set of imaginative entrepreneurs. So who knows, with all respect, Pankoti, right? Is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. With all respect, you might be not necessarily the next Bill Gates in terms of what he did, but a Bill Gates-like person, or with all deference to gender, I should say, the next Melinda Gates, who can create a world or an India where there are no problems that are immediately problems as such.
So I understand that we are nearly reaching the end of the webinar. So Mr. Damodaran, will you be able to take a couple more questions? Is that fine?
I actually have to join another Zoom in 2 minutes. So
okay.
Please forgive me. But I have put my my email address in the chat, and I see that I've already received some messages on LinkedIn. I'm very grateful, and I'd be happy to to be in touch and correspond and frankly, and I say this with all humility, and also to learn from each one of you. Please, if you can, keep me posted on how the fellowship is going, how your work is going, and what it means to you. I've been privileged to be involved in the start of this wonderful movement. I can only say that it really warms my heart to see all of you, even if only electronically.
So thank you so much, all the Millennium Fellows, for those fantastic questions. It's been wonderful to see such engagement and curiosity. And as we bring today's enlightening session with Mr. Damodaran to a close, I want to extend a very heartfelt gratitude for his invaluable insights. Mr. Damodaran has shared his contacts privately in the chat, so feel free to connect with him if you'd like. And to be honest, our journey as Millennium Fellows is just beginning, and there is a lot more to come. So stay excited. So don't miss our next exciting webinar this Friday with Adam Mostol, and make sure to mark your calendars for next Wednesday with Andrew Maynard, and the following Friday with Jabari Dorsey. So keep an eye out on your emails and the Millennium Fellowship website for more details on the webinars. Thank you. So yeah, just lastly, let's give a huge round of applause to Mr. Damodaran. Thank you, sir, for taking your time, share your wisdom with us. Your words of inspiration has really meant all of us a great deal, and we are committed to keeping the spirit of change alive, inspired by you. Thank you all for your enthusiastic participation. Stay
Thank you,
energized.
Siddharth.
Right. Thank you, sir.